All right, just as we get started, we're going to go into chapter 2 now. But again, as I mentioned to you, I'm using this book both for this class and for the 152, 167 class. All right, I'm probably going through the material in the 167 class a little slower, but if you go out to my YouTube channel, all right, you're going to find all the stuff out there, and it's broken down by class, so you can see both of them. All right, the lecture I just gave was very similar to the first one that I gave to the class the other day. All right, so we're in chapter 2. Chapter 2, it should just be called debugging because it's not really just debugging JavaScript. In fact, that's at the end of it. They talk in here how to go and use and debug things in the DOM, debug HTML, debug CSS, etc. So they go through all of that in here. You may or may not be aware of this, but just in case you're not, I mean, right now, I think you'd all agree if you look up here, I got a web page up there, all right? And where you've got your function keys on the top of the keyboard, right now I'm using Chrome. So if I hit F12, now that's the Chrome Web Developer Tools right there, all right? So I can come in here and I can do a bunch of different stuff. Much of the stuff they have you do in this chapter, they have you do from the console. And you can actually, that's actually a prompt. You can type JavaScript in here if you want to. You can test it. You can do a lot of different stuff that way. All right. But if you go back in, you can also go in and look through your HTML and see the CSS that's in there. All right. You can go through everything that's on your screen and you can highlight different things that are in here. So for instance, there's an iframe. Okay, and you can highlight it, and it actually shows you in here what's being highlighted. And in here, it shows you how everything has been set up for it. In other words, this is the CSS box model here, and what it's showing here is how much margin you have, how much border, how much padding, etc. you have. So much of the chapter goes through this, and they go through a couple of examples. They have you load in a web page that has mistakes in it on purpose, so you can go through the act of fixing those mistakes. All right, then you will load in another one that has mistakes in it. So we're going to go over those, but I'm just going to show you what the mistakes are. If you say, well, I'd really like to learn this, then you're going to do that on your own, okay? Because really, like I said, with the way that this class is set up, we could spend a whole period just on the debugger. You'd probably understand it a lot better that way. All right, but I've chosen not to do that. Like I said, my goal is by Wednesday, we'll already have 6 out of 29 chapters of the book done. That's more than 20%. All right. So, F12 turns it on, F12 again turns it off. All right. So they call that the Developer Tools Console. And again, the one that the author uses is Google Chrome, but you don't have to do it through Google Chrome. IE has its own copy, and Firefox has its own copy. Okay, so with Firefox it's Firebug. Here it's called Chrome Developer Tools. It goes by another name in IE. I don't remember what it was. Opera has its own. All right, I'm sure Safari does as well. So what they show you in here is they have you load in this file. And you may or may not be able to quickly scan it and see, oh, there's the problem. But there's 2 errors in this code. The first error is they spell function wrong. All right? And you say, well, geez, I see that. But again, if you've got a program and you keep typing and typing, I keep hammering, especially on the first year people on this. But I told them yesterday, I've watched some of you in here and you'll write a very long, complex program. Maybe even a few hundred lines. And it looks like you're never testing it. You write, then you start to test. It's better to write a little and test it. Write a little more and test it. All right? But if you've got a ton of stuff, you may have easily overlooked something like that. So that's one error. All right? When you click that, then it loads correctly, but there's still another error. The other error is, it says when you've got the span here that says click me, when you click it, it's supposed to call the routine called click it. But notice up here it's called click it now. All right? So that's not going to actually give you an error that'll stop the program from running, but when you click on it, then it'll give you an error because you're calling a non-existent function. And that's what they explain to you in there. All right? So what the author shows you when you go through this is exactly the fact that you've got an error. All right? And it says unexpected identifier. And that's the thing with the function. So you fix that. Then you get this. All right? If you actually bring it up on the screen, you'll probably find something that looks like that. This should look at least somewhat familiar to you. It isn't exactly the same thing that you find like in Visual Studio, but it's very similar. All right. So now we go and do it. It runs. It says the page loaded correctly, but now it says uncaught reference. Click it not defined. All right, because again, you're calling click it, and it looks through here, and it says, I've gone through all your JavaScript. You don't have a routine called click it. Actually, what it does first is it sees if there is a system function named click it. There isn't. So it says, did you define one? There isn't. So it's throwing that exception right there. Once you fix that and either make them both click it or both click it now, then it works. And every time you click it, it says user clicked. All right, and that fixes it. It's a simple example. All right. But then they talk how you can go through and start, and this is, I think, at least a pretty good example of how you can inspect actual HTML elements. You may or may not be able to tell that taking a look on the screen right now, but where it says favorite movies, and then underneath it there's a bullet list that says Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Narnia, and Hot Lead and Cold Feet. All of it right now, all of it is italicized. The only word that was supposed to be italicized in there is favorite. All right, well, it's pretty easy for you to figure out that the problem was that they put in a beginning I tag and there's no ending I tag. So it just goes all the way through till the end and it italicizes everything. All right, I think most of us at least, I know I've done that already several times. The other error, here we've got our unordered list items. Notice the first one doesn't say LI, it says LL. All right, and maybe he gave examples in here that were too simple. He's, well, I'd never make those. But people make you make mistakes. You don't try to, but you make mistakes. So he shows you that when you go in here and you start looking at the different things that are available to you, the DOM tree, breaking on changes, edit as HTML, hovering, you can go through and you can do any of those things in here. All right. So we're looking at everything, and you all know this, that when you got the little down arrow there, you can expand and collapse on those arrows. All right. And that's what he's trying to show you. So you go in and you make the first change. Now, I guess I can't show you that. Now favorite is italicized and nothing else is. That's what you'd want. All right. But you still have the problem with you don't have that list item there. All right. So how would you figure that out? Well, if you look right here, when you run through the whole thing, notice what it has here. It's got an LL tag right where the cursor is resting, but there's no ending LL tag because there is no LL tag. All right? So that's what he's trying to show you in here. When you make all those changes, everything looks fine. All right? And he also says that you can come in here and you can come into the you can come into the console and literally type in like window, and it'll show you. Well, that's not much. Oh, that's a ton of stuff in there. Those are all the things related to your document window. So if you wanted to see how something is set, where it's set, etc., and again, you can keep drilling down as you see. All right, and he talks about how you can do that. Would you ever want to do that? It depends. I don't know about you, but occasionally I'll go and I'll be coding something and I'll be looking at it and looking at it and looking at it. And for the life of me, I can't figure out what's wrong. All right? That's what I've told you when you get those kind of errors to walk away for a while. Okay? So they go through, again, the rest of the stuff that's in here. Then he says, well, what if the problem's in your CSS? And I like this book. As you know, I pick out the books. So when you do your course evals at 9 weeks and at 17 or 16 or whatever, and you don't like the book, write that down. If you like the book, write that down. It's nice to hear one way or the other, even if it's negative. But I like the way he shows where everything is in here. And a lot of times what he'll do, it's like, he'll talk about the layout editor. It's what I already mentioned. That thing is referred to as the CSS box model, all right? And that's how everything is set up. Margin on the outside, then border, then padding, then content. So he shows you, you can go in here and you can disable styles, so you can turn things off, all right? You can edit different things. What's nice about using this, and you got to read the chapter. I try to show you examples, but I probably screw them up, and I don't want to do that. But with some of the stuff that's in here, you can literally make changes on the fly. So you can go into the CSS, and you're like, geez, I wonder what it would look like if I took the background and made it like a real light shade of blue. You can go in there and just key that in, and you can make the change. It doesn't change the file itself. It just changes what's resonating on the screen. All right, and again, he talks about this layout editor, as mentioned, in a little bit more depth and breadth of coverage. Then he gives you another exercise. Right now, he says, this looks like this. What you want it to look like is this. All right, so you want it to look like this, and right now, it looks like that. And then he says to try to figure out what the problems are. Well, the biggest problem is, this is set up so that each one of these lines that's on here only takes up 100 pixels in width. And these things by themselves are 70 pixels. Do the math. So you could fit one in there, but it can't fit two because it would need 140 pixels. So the first thing he tells you to do is to stretch that out, and instead of having it be 100 pixels, make it 300 pixels. All right? Once you do that, you follow those steps, then it looks like this. And he says, okay, that's all fine and dandy, but right now, there's still a little bit too much space in between these. So he says basically set it up so there's no padding. All right, and once you do that, then it looks more like this. All right, and you still could go in and manually change it if you didn't like the way it looked. All right, from there he goes on and talks some more about the JavaScript debugger. And when you look at the different things that are in here, okay, he says JavaScript view, shows you your actual code. I already mentioned that to you. You've got the source selection menu. So if you've got multiple JavaScript files, they'll show over there. You can click on any one to bring it up and make it active. Pause on exceptions. All right, notice what that says. When this option is selected, the browser will break into the debugger and stop executing if an execution error occurs. That's one you might want to turn on, because if it's off, the program's going to poop out as soon as it comes up with an exception. All right, watch, and if you never heard of the watch window before, then shame on me for not introducing it to you. But if we look over here, look on the screen right now, this right here, this is your watch window. You can put a watch on any global or non-global variable. So as your program's running, what that'll show you is its value at any time while the program is running. Not only that, if you say, gee, I wonder what would happen if I change this to 6, where it's 1 right now. You just change it to 6 and tell the program to keep going, and it'll keep running. So you can change stuff on the fly, all right, and immediately see the updates. So the author does a nice job here of explaining what each one of these things are. The call stack, you all know that from Java, that when you get an error, the call stack shows you what function, call what function, call what function, call the function that currently is screwed up, type of thing. Breakpoints, we know how to set breakpoints. We've done that before in other editors. Currently executing line, it's denoted in there by a yellow line. The resume, the step into, step over, and step out. There are equivalents of each one of these right here. There are equivalents of each one of those in Visual Studio. All right. Then he comes through with this example, and I'm going to put the code up here. You may or may not be able to figure it out by just having me show this to you, but it's really a pretty simple error. what he wants to do is each time you run this particular program and you click, it's supposed to be adding 1 to a counter, like you see right here, and then returning the counter. The problem is, we should have made counter a global variable. Since it's a local variable, every time you come into the function, it's creating it all over again. So it'll say, oh, it's equal to 1, add 1 to it and return 2. All right? But then it comes in again, instead of having a value of 2, it has 1 again because you're recreating it and it has 2. So it's either 1 or 2 the way this is currently written. So the author has you just transpose these 2 lines. So put the var cnt equal 1 outside of the function call, just to show you how that will work. So if you get any benefit of running through that exercise. Then finally, the last thing that's in there allows you to analyze network traffic. For what we're doing, this really isn't going to be of a lot of use because you're using XAMPP or you're using Node.js. But if you were an administrator and you were running this, and you were administering a regular server, you could look at this and say, okay, what are my biggest files in here? What's my biggest latency time in here? And you look in here, wow, 829 milliseconds, that's a lot more than anything else. So when you're starting to go through a site and you want to see this, boy, my site's really slow, you can go through with a network analyzer and you can go through and try to find out what is executing that's taking the most time. Because when you want to start to optimize, that's a good place to start to optimize. All right? And that pretty much was it for this chapter. So that's it for chapter 2. So I'm going to jump right into chapter 3. Again, this, much more even than the first 2 chapters, this should almost, right, all of that should be review. Everything that's in blue right now should be reviewed to you. You should understand how to build a basic dynamic web page, where to add CSS and JavaScript. You should know the difference between block and inline elements. You should know how to add images to a web page. You should know how to build web forms. You should know how to add links to specific spots or jumps in a web page. And you should know how to build tables. You may or may not have done work before using SVG and using audio and video. You may have, you may not have. I think that at least some of you in here, when you took the 157 class, I believe I was the one who taught it. And one of the first things we did on maybe the second or third day, all right, was we went in, and in fact, if you had Arinda, I don't know if you did it or not, but what I did in my class the second or third day is we built a real simple web page. And we put an iframe up in a corner of it, and we put a little video in there. All right, why? Just so you saw the video tags. So you may not have done a lot of work with SVG, which are, scalar vector graphics, and you may not have done a lot of work with audio and video, but the rest of the stuff that's in here, you should know already. All right, so things like doc type. This is the doc type we use now, right? This is the one the author uses, although I personally, when I write my own, I try to put doc type in lowercase. But it doesn't matter. You can put it in uppercase, lowercase, or mixed case. This line right here, if you don't know this line that you see in blue, that line, doc type HTML, has replaced this line and this line, all right? So you don't have to write all that junk anymore. In the past, there was actually, they only show 2 of them here, but there were 3 different things that you could put in there. You could put in strict, like they say. You could put in loose, like they say. And another one was frame set. You may or may not be aware of this, but if I come in here and type in HTML tag list, all right, HTML tags, it's in one of these. I don't know what, yeah, there you go. When I start looking in here, you'll notice that a bunch of these are red. They say not supported in HTML5. Some of the rest of them have got the little HTML5 insignia, so they're new in HTML5. All right. So why am I showing you this? Because if you use strict, if you use this one, that says that anything that's been deprecated, all those things that say don't use them in HTML5, that means if you try to use them and you use that doc type statement, you'll get error messages. when you try to validate it. All right? If you use this one, that means allow anything to be used, whether it's deprecated or not. And the other one, which is frame set, is just like this one, except the frame stuff is still allowed to be used. And you say, do I have to care? No. If you're doing new development, always use that one, and you'll be fine. All right. They explain what the title element is. I'm not going to go through that. You should have had that in the 157 class. All right? So you should all be able to look at this, at what's in here, and understand what's going on. There's really not very much in here. They talk about style. And again, they talk about coming in and actually putting that in. That CSS on your screen right now, that's in blue. That should make sense to each and every one of you in here. All right? It says for any H1 tag, I want a background color of black, and I want a text color of white. So in other words, it's reversing. So it looks like this. Here they're going through and they're doing it right here using straight CSS. Here, if you haven't seen it before, if you didn't do anything with it, that's jQuery. All right? That says, if I've got, this is only one way of doing it. If I've got any H1 tag, add to it add CSS to it, the background color, make it black. All right? And this could have been done literally on one line if we wanted to do it. We could have used chaining to put it all on one line. The no script tag, which is used if the person has JavaScript disabled. So if they do, that's going to come up and show this. All right. You all know how to use the link tag to go and link your spreadsheet files. You've all done that before. All right. You should all understand the difference between an ID and a class. Again, there's nothing in there that I think is new to anybody. Okay? He does a nice picture here of at least showing pictorially the difference between block elements and inline elements. Block elements have a blank line before them and after them. Inline elements don't. So block elements, div tag, p tag, etc. All right? And inline elements are like a bold tag or a strong tag or whatever. Again, that's all explained right here. You can force what you want to have happen by using, tell it how to display. So you can display something in either block format, inline format, or none. This is one of the most misunderstood things that most people put in websites. If you put none, for lack of better words, it doesn't show on the screen, but it's still there. People think, well, I made none, so it's not there anymore. No, it just doesn't show. It doesn't render, but it still exists in the DOM, so you still can manipulate it. So if you wanted things to appear and disappear, you could do that by setting the display to none. Container elements, I'm taking for granted. You all know the difference between a paragraph, a div, and a span. The idea is with a div, it's going to be multiple lines long, typically. With a span, it's all on the same line, typically. All right, and you know what a paragraph is. So they go in there and they build this. And they add some CSS to it to pretty it up. Again, when you get done, he gives you the whole thing. Remember, you have this code. All of this code is on the P drive, and it's all on Blackboard also. So if it's next week and you're working on your website, you forget something, or you need a little boost, you can go back and look at that. Right? All right. Does everybody know what this is? I'm asking, right there. Do you ever see a jump in a website, like maybe in several places on a web page, they say go to top type of thing? That's what this would be. And that's how you set it up. Yes?
But they got a space in between local and link. Does that matter? It looks like it's an ID to call
Technically, it shouldn't matter because it's all in the double quotes, but you'd have to make sure that when you were naming it, you put it that way also. Really, it should have been an underscore or just run them together. Okay. All right. You should all understand how to use images. What's the only tag, oh, I'm sorry, what's the only attribute on an image tag that's mandatory? Source. Typically, you put in width and height because that sends a message to the browser of how much room they'll need so they can start framing what's going in there. All right? You know the difference between an unordered list and an ordered list. You should understand all this stuff for tables. Now again, depending on who you had for a teacher and the amount of complexity she or he wanted to use, you might have done a table and you might have had headers and data and nothing else. All right, but you should at least know about the existence of a T head and of a T body and of a T foot. Remember, the weird thing is if you use all those, normally you think it's the head, then the body, then the foot. But if you use a T head and a T body and a T foot, the T body has to come at the bottom. You must have the T head, then the T foot, then the T body. All right. And that's explained in here also. You should understand the different attributes you can use with a table to span multiple rows, to put borders on, etc. And he has you create this. Let me just tell you, just so you know, that when you go through here and you're looking at the actual source code, all right, for instance, this is chapter 2, and you go, wait a minute, that's just CSS, there's no images. If you can't find the images, they're all in here, in the actual images folder. He threw everything together. I don't know why he did that, and most of the time the pathing is screwed up. So if you decide you want to go in and try some of those exercises, you might have to change some of the paths that are put in there. Forms, again, boy, he makes a really butt-ugly form as far as I'm concerned. He puts no CSS in there, and he just kind of throws a bunch of stuff in. But you should understand what a field set is, what a legend is, what labels are, what text boxes are, drop downs, radio buttons, text areas, that's not a radio button, check boxes, etc. Submit button and reset button. You will be required to put buttons and most of this stuff on a form. You will have to do a form. Not only that, because you know how to do it, I'm also going to require that when you get all that information, that you send it out to a PHP file, and you're going to end up creating something for the user on that. And why? Because, again, this class is meant to bring together what you've learned over both years of the program. All right? So here's all that code for that. Then he goes into some advanced stuff. There's two basic ways that you can do graphics in HTML5. You can use SVG graphics, and you can write really neat stuff. I'm dating myself here, so when I say this word, you may never have heard of this, but when I was a little kid, I remember that my brother for Christmas one year got a thing called a spirograph. And that's kind of, you'd make stuff that looked like this. But you can make very nice looking graphics using SVG. All right, typically a lot nicer looking than what you create with Canvas. The Canvas stuff is typically simpler for simpler graphics. What people hate about it is you can end up writing a lot of code. All right. He goes through a big long song and dance how to draw all this stuff. He makes a clock. Nothing like self-promotion too when you make a clock, right? All right, and then he shows you the code for that. And then finally he talks about a canvas. And again, typically canvases are used for more simplistic looking designs. All right. Talks very little bit about media elements, so about the audio tag and the video tag that are in here. Again, the biggest problem with audio and video, all right, that's one of the reasons that HTML5 was created. All right, especially when Mac made the move that they weren't going to support Flash. All right, they had to come up with something. The biggest problem with audio and video tags right now is that not all browsers agree on what should be the standard. This is where a lot of times you put a lot of those browser prefixes in. Remember these? What else is there? Moz, MS. I think it's WebKit. All right, remember those? What's Moz? Firefox. What's MS? IE, it's Microsoft. And WebKit is Safari, and it's also Chrome because they both use the WebKit engine. All right. And that's it for that chapter. All right. So when we pick it up next class, CSS for the first hour and JavaScript for the second hour. All right. And like I said, I'll do my best to make sure that when you come in here on Thursday, that I have your first assignment done for you. All right. Questions? All right. It's early, but there's no time to go through anything else, and we've gone through plenty today.